Karen, self-crowned monarch of the cul-de-sac and unofficial enforcer of parking etiquette, noticed a pickup truck sitting outside my house one crisp Monday morning. She stood frozen, glaring at it as though it had personally offended her. It wasn't parked crooked. It wasn't in anyone's way. It broke exactly 0 rules. But in Karen's warped, control-obsessed mind, it simply didn't fit her idea of how the neighborhood should look. Her opinion, not a fact. Without bothering to knock on a single door or verify a single detail, she stomped down the street, phone gripped tight, heels striking the pavement like she was marching into battle. She rang up the HOA's towing contractor, rattled off her grievances like an overcaffeinated lapdog, and within the hour the truck had vanished. Just like that. No warning issued, no questions raised, not even a note left behind. The nerve of her, the sheer entitlement. She sauntered back to her porch as though she'd just performed a heroic public service. Settled in with her iced tea as if she'd single-handedly rescued the block from disaster. She even had the audacity to fire off a smug post in the neighborhood group chat. We all need to keep our streets looking respectable. I had the eyesore truck removed. You're welcome. I nearly spat out my coffee reading that. Here's the real kicker though. Karen never once bothered to find out who actually owned that truck. Not me, not any neighbor, not the HOA board, no one. She simply took one look, passed judgment, and made it disappear like some self-appointed parking enforcer with a superiority complex. That alone would have been outrageous enough. But fate had other plans for Karen. Plans she was nowhere near prepared for, because that ugly truck she'd towed without a shred of authorization didn't belong to some random resident, a careless teenager, or a lost delivery guy. No, that blacked-out Ford Raptor, still caked in mud and sporting unmistakable law enforcement plates, belonged to someone you absolutely do not want to cross. Karen had no idea. She figured she'd just notched another HOA victory. What she didn't realize was that she'd just picked a fight with a man whose badge came backed by federal muscle. And by the time the truth caught up with her, the damage was already done. The fallout didn't take long to arrive. That afternoon, I heard boots crunching against gravel and the low rumble of a diesel engine. Peering out my window, I saw the sheriff himself, sleeves shoved up, jaw clenched tighter than a bank vault. His truck was missing, and his temper matched the storm clouds rolling in overhead. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, trying to seem unbothered. He didn't speak right away, just swept his eyes across the street like he was surveying a crime scene. Then he turned to me and asked the exact question hanging in the air. "Where's my truck?" I shrugged. I was just about to ask you the same thing. Within minutes, the sheriff was on the phone, and these weren't casual calls. I caught phrases like asset recovery, unauthorized tow, and send 2 undercover units to sweep the area. I nodded along and slowly backed off, because this wasn't just a man who was angry, he was methodical. And deep down, I had a pretty strong suspicion which entitled troublemaker had stirred up this particular hornet's nest. By the time the sun started setting, 2 black SUVs rolled in like something straight out of a political drama. Out stepped a pair of agents, federal clearly, given the sharp suits and earpieces, and they didn't waste a second on pleasantries. They spread out through the neighborhood, asking residents if they'd witnessed anything unusual, spotted a tow truck, or heard anyone boasting about getting a vehicle hauled away. It was only a matter of time before all signs pointed to Karen. Having lived in this neighborhood long enough, I knew Karen was constitutionally incapable of staying quiet when she believed she'd done something righteous. She thrived on HOA drama. Naturally, she'd already bragged to at least 3 people about how she'd handled that obnoxious oversized truck parked near number 17. Her words, not mine. So when the agents regrouped, comparing notes, one of them murmured something into his wrist mic. Neither of them was smiling. Neither was in the mood for politeness. They were gearing up for a confrontation. I stood on my porch watching it all unfold, because when you cross someone with a badge and real authority, no HOA bylaw on earth is going to bail you out. The agents approached her house, like they were about to run a tactical raid. Karen, wrapped in her silk robe and slippers, swung the door open with an expression that practically screamed, "Oh, wonderful. More people to witness my brilliance." One agent flashed his badge while the other asked, "Ma'am, were you the one who had a truck towed from in front of number 17 earlier today?" She gave a self-satisfied nod, arms folded like she was owed a round of applause. "Yes, I did. That truck was hideous. It clearly didn't belong to anyone who mattered." That single sentence made the agent's composure crack for just a moment. The taller one looked at her like she'd just admitted to swiping the crown jewels because they didn't match her curtains. She hadn't even considered asking whose vehicle it was. She saw it, decided she hated it, and called the tow company the way someone orders lunch. "Ma'am," the shorter agent said, voice level but pointed. "Are you aware the vehicle you had removed belongs to the sheriff of this county?" Karen blinked like she'd been smacked with a soggy newspaper. "The sheriff? Her voice climbed an octave, her bravado crumbling. Well, how was I supposed to know that? It didn't have his name plastered on it. The agent said nothing, just let that excuse sit there like a bad odor. She fumbled to recover, rambling about HOA authority and protecting the neighborhood's image, but it was already over. The instant she grasped whose truck she'd tampered with, you could practically hear her thoughts grinding to a halt. Then came the real blow. The agent pulled out a small recorder, pressed play, and out came Karen's own voice bragging to a neighbor, "If I don't like how it's parked, it's gone." That's simple. Her jaw dropped so hard I swear I heard something crack. She tried to deny it, but between the recording and the tow company's paperwork, she was buried far too deep to climb out. Just like that, the neighborhood's self-appointed parking police had been caught dead to rights, and her precious HOA status was about to be dismantled in a courtroom. Karen figured things couldn't get any worse. She was wrong. Because next came the sheriff himself, wearing the calm smile of a man with a court order, flanked by a legal team armed with paperwork thicker than the rulebook Karen loved to weaponize. She stood frozen on her lawn in leopard print and flip-flops, staring down a stack of subpoenas, civil violation notices, and a lawyer who looked like he'd been waiting his entire career for a target exactly like her. One look at the documents, and her iced tea slipped from her fingers in slow-motion defeat. Towing the sheriff's truck, it turned out, was only the spark. Once investigators started digging, they uncovered far more than expected. Falsified HOA expense reports, funds quietly funneled into her own kitchen remodel, complete with imported marble counters, and a jacuzzi tub that appeared suspiciously around the same time 3 budget relocations went through. Then surveillance footage surfaced showing Karen ordering landscapers to work on her personal property, billed straight to the HOA. And then there was the disabled veteran she'd harassed into repainting his mailbox 4 separate times because it didn't match the approved community palette. That one landed its own civil complaint. By Wednesday, Karen's world was collapsing fast. The sheriff's legal team filed charges for unauthorized towing and damage to government property. The tow crew had scratched the undercarriage. Fines began piling up like a losing game of Tetris. Then came 5 separate civil lawsuits from neighbors who'd clearly been waiting years for this exact reckoning. And to top it off, a restraining order from the sheriff, barring her from coming within 100 feet of his truck, him, or my front yard. The HOA called an emergency vote, and for once, everyone was in complete agreement. Karen was removed from the board and banned from attending meetings for the next 10 years. Her expression when they announced that was priceless, like watching her entire sense of self go down the drain. These days, she stays hidden behind her curtains, flinching every time a tow truck rolls by, pretending she doesn't notice her mailbox overflowing with final notices and legal warnings. The end.